So we are in that countdown to the State of the Nation address to be delivered by President Cyril Ramaphosa on Thursday. But in the wake of his appointment, or his election as president at least, by the ANC in 2017, PWC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, then predicted 5 economic outcomes that could develop under his administration. Those included a 10-point action plan and the New Deal agenda that would be front and centre when it came to policy making and communication with investors. Well, the ANC was expected to show a renewed vigour and focus on national issues instead of party politics. So which scenario has materialised in? Let's discuss it. I'm joined by PwC's chief economist, Lulu Krugel. Lulu, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for coming in. So when Cyril Ramaphosa was elected ANC president, December 2017, the word at the time, the buzz phrase was Ramaphoria. People had all this great expectation. Has it all been a damn squib?
Well, to be quite honest, we put 5 scenarios forward at that point in time, and the Rama progress scenario was our most likely one, and we had 2 downside scenarios, and we currently feel that where we ended up is not the worst case that we predicted at that point in time, but the second worst scenario that we actually predicted, and that's kind of where we come up short in terms of what was promised at that point in time and what we all expected, and what has in fact transpired in the economy and in the policy environment.
And I want to pick up on economy because you talk about how there have been all these negative decisions. You look at the downgrades by the ratings agencies. Growth has slowed, for example. Unemployment is at an 11-year high. And yet when Ramaphosa was elected by the ANC, people said, oh, this is a man who's got a business background. He should know how to woo investors. Why has his election not been the silver bullet that many thought it would be?
Well, to be very honest, I think it's because if we look at the policy direction, there's a couple of things that comes into play. So globally, we're at levels where policy uncertainty and economic uncertainty is at its highest levels ever. And that has, had an impact on the South African environment as well. We've seen policy uncertainty and economic uncertainty here as well. So globally, everything didn't go the way that we hoped as well. But more importantly, if we look at the domestic scenario, it feels like there's, discord in terms of what government's trying to achieve. They pull in different directions. If you look at policy conversations, it doesn't seem to come from one mouth. And it doesn't seem to follow the same path and the same direction. And that is probably the most important factor at this point in time that's impacting on the success of what we've seen over the last 2 years. So there's been a lot of promises. There's been initiatives like the Investment Summit, etc. But at the end of the day, if we look at Eskom, for example, different messages coming out.
Do you expect that policy certainty to come out of the State of the Nation address Thursday?
I certainly hope so. I do think it's a very high priority for the President. He's been saying for some time that he needs to address business confidence and cost of doing business. And I'm pretty certain he realizes that policy certainty is important. But again, I'm not 100% sure that he has the support from all the areas of government that he needs to actually implement what needs to happen. So whilst I do believe it will be a focus this year, I'm wary that we shouldn't expect, magic on Thursday and suddenly solutions and clarity around Eskom. He mentioned last year in his State of the Nation that by March of last year we would know more about what's happening with Eskom. Well, there's been a little bit of progress, but to be quite honest, we're pretty much where we were a year ago, if you're honest.
I want to go back to the issue of internal ANC politics and how they affect some of the indecision at presidential and ministerial level, because that was always bound to happen. When you look at the margins coming out of that conference at Nasrec, Ramaphosa's victory was by no means a landslide. The party was incredibly divided, factionalized. How likely is it that we're likely to see an internal rebuild of the party, because that benefits the country?
Yeah. To be very honest, we need clear policy direction and clear direction from the ruling party, because that, at the end of the day, spills over in their policy. So this divide that we're seeing is not doing anybody any favours. Having said that, it's interesting because this is almost something that we see globally at this point in time, that there's not certainty in most countries out there in terms of what policy direction we should take. So it's not a uniquely South African phenomenon, not a uniquely South African problem. We need to rethink, the whole global economy and how we play in this environment. But the fact that, there's uncertainty, for example, around which direction, what should happen with Eskom. There's certain different views around the nationalisation of the Reserve Bank, etc. And it's all coming from people within the ANC having very different views. It's really not helping.
We speak a great deal about the state-owned enterprises and how their instability there affects the country, but apart from throwing money at the problem, is enough being done at policy level about the triple challenges of poverty, inequality and unemployment?
Yeah, so if you look at the SOEs, I think one of the challenges at this point in time is what are they supposed to do? What role are they supposed to play? What mandate should they actually adhere to? And you know, there's so many different parties playing a role here, different government departments, etc. So whilst the SOEs are supposed to have a developmental role to create jobs, to actually help to address poverty, you know, if you look at Eskom, service provision also to the poor, etc.
Job cuts also looming at many of these SOEs, which adds to the unemployment burden, doesn't it? The problem, rather, not a burden.
It does. But the challenge is if you continue to throw money at that problem, at what cost does it come for the rest of the economy? And that's the conundrum that we're sitting with.
You have said, though, I mean, suppose optimism to a degree that while things are bad, South Africa is not quite at the worst-case scenario, which you described as a mouldy mess. But how much longer can we keep that worst-case scenario at bay as a country?
Yeah. If we make the right decisions, the time is really, it's now. We can't wait any longer. So the State of the Nation and the budget speech will give us some clear direction in terms of whether or not government is brave enough to make certain of those tough decisions. So definitely, if you ask me this question, maybe at the end of February, I will be able to tell you. At this point in time, I'm still very hopeful. What is playing in our favour at the moment is the fact that the global economy is under so much pressure. And as a country, we can still offer returns that's way above what you see in other places. So that actually plays in our favour a little bit at this point in time, and we should use that, and we should actually benefit from that.
Let me ask you this then, Lulu, just on the international situation. Do we as South Africans pay enough consideration to the external factors outside our country that impact on our ability to grow, to create jobs and the like?
On some of the longer-term fronts, I'm afraid not necessarily. If you think about things like, and I'm so tired of this word, but the fourth industrial revolution, you know, and how we respond from an education side, I'm concerned that we're not necessarily readying ourselves to be able to respond to that. But having said that, we also have a unique situation and unique challenges that we need to address. So I also don't think we should focus so much on what's going on in the rest of the world and lose focus on certain of the things that we need to do here for ourselves as well.
It's a lot to get through. Lulu Krugel, PWC Chief Economist, thank you so much for being on Nightline.